Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in. My name is Mike Corrado, and we are here with a very special Creators Hour called On Assignment. As you may know, we have launched two great Nikon Z cameras, the Z6 II and the Z7 II, and we wanted to create a series of talks with photographers that have actually used the product, and we've got one of them with us today. We have Mr. Andrew Hancock, commercial sports photographer and Nikon ambassador. Andrew, how are you doing today?
Good, brother. How are you?
I'm doing great. These are exciting times, and I know we're so locked into 2020 being our worst year in a long time, but so many good things are happening amidst the tragedy of COVID and some of the things that are going on socially, but we will overcome it all, and it's nice to see you. You're in Texas right now, right?
Yes, sir. Home in Dallas.
Mm-hmm. And since we did our last interview, Creators Hour interview, when you talked about your defining images, we've sort of now moved on to a place where we came to Andrew Hancock and said, we've got this cool camera coming, right? We give you that call. We don't tell you many details. We just say, start thinking Z6, and maybe you can formulate a shoot around Z6. And I know you're the consummate professional. You start going to work right away. So first, tell everybody a little bit about who you are in case they don't know who Andrew Hancock is, and then let's start talking about the assignment.
Sure, sounds good. No, like you said, I'm a photojournalist is at heart. You know, that's where my roots are. Started off working newspapers, and then just a handful of years into the newspaper game, started doing work with Sports Illustrated and other magazines, and just kind of grew from there. So now I do everything. I've done stuff with Sports Illustrated, ESPN, Players Tribune, pro teams, college teams, leagues, the whole nine yards. I can do everything. That's what you do as a photojournalist, but most known for my sports work. And as a former athlete, it's something that, you know, definitely is a place where my heart is. So it's fun just trying to capture those fleeting moments in action, tell those stories behind the scenes. And it's certainly something I'm incredibly passionate about. So.
The athleticism is not going away. Did you not just recently injure your arm? Mountain climbing? What's your deal there?
Shoulder, yeah. A little grade 2 shoulder and lat tendon strain with like a 10 to 12 week recovery. I'm about 2/3 of the way through it. So not pleasant, but at least it's not keeping me off my bike for trying to train for a possible run at an Ironman in the spring. It's definitely keeping me out of the pool from swimming. So we'll see how that goes. But, you know, it's just bumps in the road, and you just take them as they come.
You wait till you get to my age and your body dictates what you can and can't do and totally overtakes the mind. But right. We're thankful to have you here today, and we definitely want to talk about your assignment. And as always, we come to you with an assignment with a very quick deadline, not a lot of turnaround time. You have to execute a series of shoots because I know that's the way you approach everything. Very, very committed. So what's it like? You get this call, we tell you there's a camera kind of like a Z6, but you know, that's all we can tell you right now. What goes through your mind when you get the call for the assignment, and how do you start building the blocks of what this assignment comes to be?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is, you know, there's certainly a lot of nerves with it because there's a lot of pressure with it. And, but that's something I think I respond well to and something I embrace. But the first things first is you got to look at the dates and say, all right, you know, this is our shoot window. This is our delivery window. You want to try to pad that by a couple of days. You always want to try to emphasize getting images in earlier because that's going to help you guys in New York and help the team in Tokyo just having those assets sooner. So obviously the sooner is always the better, but yeah, it's a quick turnaround. There's a lot of pressure in trying to do that. But trying to produce something like this in a COVID world is very challenging to say the least. From a sports perspective, it's almost impossible right now trying to get venues. I mean, especially whenever you're reaching out to people like, hey, I have money. I want to pay you money to use your place. And you just get ghosted or, you know, it's just, you know, sorry, and it's not going to work. Same thing with trying to get athletes right now, especially those that are still competing. You know, it's really a challenge, and you've got to ensure that you're going to do it safely and responsibly. And just try to work with people that you've worked with before, trying to cast a net to try to get some new people right now. Is certainly a little more challenging, but you know, those people that you have a relationship with, that you've worked with previously, they know how you're going to act and how you're going to, and then they also know the quality of images that you're going to produce. So they're willing to give of their time and step in and help you create something to showcase the new product. So.
Yeah, the reason why I ask you, because I want everybody out there to understand that it's not just going out and taking pictures. You have to start to set up your ideas. You have to start making contacts. You deal with some rejection, as you say, ghosting. You have to put it all together. You have to get it ready for the shoot days. You have to hope the weather cooperates and kind of adjust along the way. And I know this was weeks of planning for you, maybe less than a week of planning and trying to make things open up. Talk a little bit about where your mind went with the subject matter that you wanted to shoot. Now, again, we give you a camera. You think Z6, you're thinking fast, you know, great quality in low light, high ISO, the speed of the system, tracking, all of that, autofocus. Where do you go in the way of ideas? So what did you come up with for your assignments that we're going to talk about?
Well, I ended up settling on football, both footballs, football and soccer, and then swimming and barrel horse racing, because I do a lot of equine sports. So whenever y'all kind of tease me a little bit with the specs of the camera, then I'm like, all right, I want to put this in positions where I know it's going to perform well, but I also want to put it in positions where it's going to challenge the camera, because then that's going to challenge me to try to make something different. And so that's always kind of my end goal, is I want to be challenged and I want to be able to do something that I haven't done before with the new product. With the football stuff, like I just wanted to kind of put it through vanilla and just see how it was going to react and make sure that, you know, everything was going to be right in line, get everything dialed in. Soccer was something I hadn't done before on a campaign. And so part of the time I'll look back at, you know, what I've done previously and say, all right, well, I don't want to keep going back to that same well. I want to diversify, you know, images I deliver, and do something a little different that's going to necessarily get me out of my comfort zone. You know, it's funny, I was a soccer player through college. It's probably my favorite sport. It's the sport I probably watched the least, and it's arguably the sport I've shot the least. So for me, it was fun to be able to do that. In fact, after our shoot that day, and we did everything for football and soccer in the Cotton Bowl Stadium in Dallas, one of the soccer players had an extra pair of cleats that happened to be in my size. So I got to lace up for the first time in 18 years. And I felt like a horse that just got let out to a green pasture afterwards. And I just got to kind of prance around a little bit. Like it felt really good to have cleats on again and still be able to put it across where I wanted it. But back to the camera, you know, you can get everything set up, but then, you know, we don't have manuals and we're working with, you know, a pre-production body. We're working, I think firmware is like 0.6, you know, it comes out, it's 1.0. So, you know, changes are still being made. And so, you know, when you first get the camera and, you know, I had no time to prepare myself with it ahead of time. So that's also a big challenge. And so then the camera gets delivered and it goes from unpackaging to setting it up and getting it right out to shooting. And that's the benefit of how continuous the Nikon system is, from, you know, the DSLRs to the Z system, is, you know, everything is similar. I mean, everything's the same. Like you pick it up and it's a Nikon and it's going to shoot just like a Nikon. You're going to be able to set it up just like a Nikon. I mean, there's, you know, that's seamless, and that's crucial, just being able to pick it in and pick it up and go. But, you know,
yeah, I kind of want to give Karen Dennison a shout out, because she worked on this with you. She's just really great when it comes to this kind of stuff, sales and photography, and she understands it all. And she got to be there with you, because all secrets and non-disclosures, and she's going to hand deliver the cameras. What I'd love to do is pull up the pictures of that you've submitted, talk about the assignments, but I know the first few pictures are really some pictures of you. And while we show these, I want you to now talk about that moment. Karen hands you the camera, right? You had I know the new 1424Z was on this shoot with you, as well as the Z6 II. We can actually say Z6 II now. You couldn't say it back then, right? And you got the new battery grip for the camera as well, because we figured as a sports photographer, we wanted that in your hands as well. First impressions of the camera when it comes out of the box.
It's just like a Z6. I mean, everything there was seamless. It looked just like it needed to look. You know, I got it set up right away. But like, I love the new grip. Like it was just the engineering that's gone into it, the design work, how the battery door comes off, hides in, the form factor. I mean, it fits really well to the body. It feels like it's part of the body. It doesn't feel like it's something that's an add-on piece. The buttons are right where you want it. It's responsive. I mean, it just works. I mean, it's like going from picking up a D5, a D6, and now I've got a grip on the mirrorless. It's fantastic. I mean, I'm going to have them on all my bodies. So I was really pumped to be able to get to have that and get to experiment with that. Pretty much as far as lenses for this, I lived off of 3 lenses. Like you mentioned, the new 14-24 2.8, the new 70-200 2.8. To kind of complete the trinity, I had my own 24-70 2.8. didn't use that very often. And then my bread and butter, which is the 400, and pairing that with the FTZ adapter. And I mean, it performed wonderfully. The first day, it's kind of like you're on a first date. You're just trying to figure out, you know, each other's little quirks, because it's a new body and I don't have a manual or anything. So, you know, you're trying to figure out some of the new functions and what it can do. And you want to kind of try to set it up and test some of those things. But right away, I could tell that the autofocus performance was very responsive, very snappy. And then once I kind of got it dialed in like I wanted to, I'd say for day 2 with the soccer, which we'll get to later on, like at that point, like we were flying through things, and anything I put it to, it performed really, really well on. But aside from that, it was just, it was natural in my hands. You know, I felt very comfortable with it, and like, you know, I was just ready to get out and making pictures. So.
I mean, I know this may sound like an obvious question, but familiarity as you go from one generation model to the next. And so now we're in the next generation Z. As a pro photographer, talk about the importance of familiarity in the buttons and the controls and the menus and the dials. Did you find any restrictions there, or was it sort of business as usual? Business
as usual. And that's the great thing. And before this, like whenever I'd have, you know, different DSLRs hanging on me, and I'd have a D5 and like a D850 or maybe a D500 or a D4S. I mean, when you're switching between the different bodies, there are different buttons in different places, especially along the top. But it's nice with this to have everything seamless and continuous. And whether I'm on a Z6 II or a Z7 or a Z7 II or whatever, I mean, everything's in the same spots. And so it's just very quick to move. But the thing that really kind of blew me away that very first day when we were shooting was battery life. I would say I filled up a 128 gig card, still went through the battery. At the end of the day, I looked down and I'd shot well over 3,000 frames. The battery wasn't done yet. The camera was still very, very live. You know, it still had a lot of power to it. And so I was like, all right, this is something new. This is really nice. I mean, I felt like the battery life in the old, with the old battery was great, but this one, it just, you know, Nikon's definitely stepped it up with this. And as a sports photographer, knowing that you can go through a full day, and I was chimping and reviewing images hard, and I didn't have to worry about the battery. There wasn't a single day where I actually depleted a battery and had to swap anything out on a shoot. So that was huge. Now you can know you can go to a game with a mirrorless camera and not have to worry about running out of batteries. Yeah, and to me, the beauty, and again, speak about the importance of this to you, is the form factor of the battery is the same. It's a new battery that adopts new technology, so you can charge or shoot on the fly from various packs. But I guess going back to your older batteries that work with your older cameras, that's a big deal to you as a photographer, no? Absolutely, absolutely. And anything that you can have that's going to, you know, be seamless and, you know, is going to deliver what you need to do is huge. And going back to the battery grip, I love the fact that, you know, for whatever reason you were to deplete a battery and it takes 2 of them in there, and you can hot swap those batteries out, and you're not having to power anything down, and you can just keep on rolling. I mean, that's clutch. Right, because you do a lot of video work as well, so that's got to be key to anybody doing time-lapse work or video work as well. So let's just jump right in, and sure. We're going to go assignment by assignment. Give everybody a bit of insight. Let's inspire everybody as to how you put this together, how you getting your athletes, but talk about these individual pictures, what lens maybe you chose, the focus mode you may have chose for this as we go forward with the other pictures as well, and certainly anything else you want to add. Sure. No, for these, for the first day, we did football, and that was kind of my break-in day with the camera, just trying to get familiar with it, test out some of the new functions, see how I wanted to use it, how I like to use it, how it fit with my workflow. Started off, did a lot of stuff just with the 14-24 and the 7-200, because it was the first time I had either one of those lenses in my hands. So when our athlete here, Joshua Harris, former NFL running back, was on set, he's insane with his training regimen, and it's something I have a lot of respect for. As much as I love covering games, like I really am interested in what athletes do to prepare and get their bodies and their minds ready to play. It's something that's, you know, a lot of people don't get to see. So we had an empty stadium to ourselves, and I had him just kind of running the steps. And so for me on this one, I'm just playing with the patterns and the lines and with the light and the 7-200, and just seeing how I can compress things and make a graphically pleasing frame, but also get him a little warmed up for our shoot. For the rest of the shoot, where I'd have him, you know, running some routes, carrying the ball, doing some diving and things like that. So at this point, just kind of getting familiar with things, kind of playing around with my settings, and just kind of roaming around and seeing what we can make. So.
I love that you talk about you're thinking about the design, because certainly the frame here is something you've considered and you've worked out. And for someone who may not be a seasoned sports photographer, they may just try to go in for that tight shot running out, but not look at the element of design. And so I love that. I love that you've done that. How many times you got this athlete running up those steps?
I think we only did this like 2 or 3 times, and you know, we had somebody there shooting video as well, and he was still getting set up. Nobody else like saw that I was doing this, and they're like, "Whoa, when did you shoot that?" I was like, "The start." Like I literally unpacked the camera, put on the 7200, walked out there and shot this shot like right out of the box. And so I just see things, I see light, and I'm like, "Hey, you know, our model shows up. I'm like, hey, Josh, let's go run over here. I want to see something," and then say, "All right." Run up a couple of times. I certainly didn't want to burn him out before a bit of a long day, but just at least get him warmed up, get myself warmed up. And it's something I preach with, you know, sports photography is you want to have a good foundation of fundamentals. And so for me, it's just going out and, you know, an athlete, you know, they're going to do some layups and do some shooting before a game, you know, that sort of thing. Like the same thing for me is photography. Like I want to go out and I want to shoot a little bit and just kind of get warmed up, get my mind going and get my fundamentals sharp before, you know, you get to really working. So
what I love about this too, and I'm going to sort of pull some technology into this, the Z system has 90% coverage in Z6, Z6 II, Z6, Z7, Z7 II. I would assume you're playing to the edge of focus, and of course you're looking to elevate yourself. Are you one level up in the stadium looking down? And then talk about the autofocus mode.
Yeah, exactly. I'm on the second level. On this one, that's the thing I love and something I appreciated. I think it was with the D500 where you could put the autofocus points like all the way, you know, to the edge of the frame. And that's something I love because, you know, in shooting for magazines, shooting for ads, like you don't want the focus always being right there in the center. So it's super advantageous to be able to put that focal point wherever I want to in the frame, and then being able to make the picture without having to shoot and kind of recompose. I put the AF right where I want to. Played around with everything from, you know, the various tracking modes to AFS, AFL, single point, which a lot of the sports that I do is in single point. And so just because I like to keep it simple and, you know, it's just always something that works for me. It's a formula that I'm comfortable with and that I go with. So.
Beautiful. Let's move on to the next picture. Pretty dynamic action here. And obviously you're in a controlled environment. You've got an athlete that's willing and able to perform for you, and probably multiple times. What's going on with this shot? What lens did you choose? What focus mode did you choose? Tell us a little bit about everything you did to make this shot.
Yeah, this one, it's the 14-24. And so I was like, all right, you know, knowing, you know, how familiar I was with the old 14-24 and loving to get, you know, that action super close up, you know, super wide angle. And that's the perfect scenario to have someone diving through the air. And so we stopped by a fabric store and buy $600-700 worth of couch foam and some white background cloths to drape over it for some fill, and test it a little bit ourselves and say, all right, guys, I'm going to need you diving and just lay out. You're not going to get hurt. Everything's going to be good. And the guys have a blast with it. We have fun with it. So it's just a fun image to make. And, you know, the good thing is since someone's not like landing on the grass, and, you know, they've got a little more stamina to do it over and over again. And so this was a situation where I was really impressed with the dynamic range and how well it was holding on to the highlights, because, you know, just over the corner of the press box is where the sun was. And so the way that it was still able to hold those highlights through the sky was really, really impressive. Again, this is a situation where you're going to run up and do super fast shutter speeds because you're going to want to freeze everything. I'm stopped down probably around f4 on this. But for autofocus, I think I had it, you know, small area AF, and just kind of would let Josh kind of take his run and then leap and just, you know, let it track it and have him come all the way through. And, you know, at 14 frames a second, you know, and I think that you just kind of, at that point, you get to pick the best one. So it makes it easy. You have a lot to choose from. So.
You bring up a great point, a technical point of 14 frames per second. As a sports photographer, you know, cameras will go 9 frames a second, 12 frames a second, you know, 14 frames a second now. How important is it to have those extra frames per second?
Well, for me, it's definitely very important. But for how I shoot, it's a little different. You know, having 14 frames a second, especially like for a remote camera, is huge whenever you've got like a thin, you know, window of focus where you have the action moving through. My background, especially in doing a lot of basketball work back in the day where I was doing strobed, it got to the point where, you know, and it still is the case, my best frame is typically that first frame. That's the instinctual reaction. Situation like this, I'm wanting to see what the whole sequence looks like. So I'm bursting through the whole movement. And so it's nice to then be able to pick out the one, because, you know, an image before, you know, his foot's going to be clipped by the top of the stadium, things like that, to where you can really get that separation. So having that option available is huge. And so, you know, you play around, you know, I shot this in single point AF, I shot it in small area, large area, you know, just trying to figure out, you know, where this camera would really perform well. And so I think both in my normal way of shooting, which is single point, it tracked it perfectly fine. And then also handled it really, really well, where I could put the camera on the ground, use the LCD on the back, flip it up, do, you know, a small group area, stuff like that, and just kind of play around, and, you know, passed all these tests with flying colors.
Well, that's a major compositional point too that you make. So for anybody out there wanting to be inspired, or they're going to be inspired to and want to get out there and go do this, just that little thing about the separation of the foot. I've seen many a shot like this where the body is like kind of falling into the stadium. Not only do you not sense the elevation, but it starts to get a little muddy, I guess, visually, you know, where things start to roll into each other. So that's one of the things I was going to point out, but you brought it up first. But that's
you don't
awesome.
want to see him like looks like he's tripping over the stadium. That's bad. So
jumping ahead too far. But this, yeah, right. You don't want that for sure. But now we got these next series of shots of this quarterback and some more football. What's going on here?
Yeah, this is kind of later on in the day. We've done plenty of shots of the guys catching passes and running routes, and everything was fine. But then as, you know, the sun starts to set, it started to kind of creep through different little kind of windows in the stadium. And so as I saw that, and I've always been a sucker for shooting backlit stuff, like, oh man, guys, you know, we were all kind of taking a little bit of a break, and I said, grab the ball, let's go. You know, we've got a window. And so it's just grab it and go and shoot. And so this is back to 7200, and just, I was so impressed with just how well it held onto the focus, but how crazy sharp it was. But also, again, with how well the camera's preserving highlights shooting something backlit like this. It just was really, really impressive. And so at this point, it's easy. I mean, we're playing with house money, and it's just like saying, all right, guys, throw some passes. We got this beautiful light. Let's use it. It's presented itself. Let's take advantage of it, and let's go. So.
You feel better when you're in a controlled situation. You get the quarterback to drop back anytime you want him to.
Exactly. And every once in a while it happens live. Happened with me covering some NFL last season. You just kind of have this window of light, and fortunately, you know, there's times when you'll be shooting and they'll just stay at the opposite end of the field from where that light is, and it drives you nuts. And it's nice just to be able to, like, hey, go here. Everything's cool. But, you know, it prepares you, at least, you know, in doing a situation like this. I know that whenever it comes and it's live, like, I know exactly what the camera's going to do. I know how it's going to perform. I know exactly what it's going to deliver.
And you use the speed light to light from the front here? Did you mention that?
No. This is all available light. So
it's available light.
Yeah,
wow.
Yeah.
The pop in that is amazing. Like you said, the dynamic range is, I swear to God, I thought you were going to tell me you popped the speed light on there.
No.
That's really, really cool. Let's keep rolling on. Now you got a speed light, right?
Yeah, your speed light.
All right, I don't want to sound like a total idiot here.
Yeah, no. For me, I'm a sucker for slow shutter portraits, especially with action. You know, it's one thing, like we saw with Josh diving in the air. You know, certainly like freezing everything, but I also like, you know, combining the freezing action with a slow shutter to combine both fast and slow on a single picture. Yeah. So that's the goal, to do this here, and using those stadium lights and back down to a 30th of a second, 15th of a second, just keep going slower and kind of find where that sweet spot is to be able to get those colors in the sunset, get enough pan in the stadium lights with the blur, and then freezing everything with an SB 5000. You know, it's wonderful how seamless and continuous the whole Nikon system is, whether you're using F glass, Z glass, putting on an SB 5000, you just put something on and it works. You know, that's the beauty of it.
And seeing these pictures, and then, you know, looking back at this last picture and this picture and more pictures to come, I have a chance to shoot with these cameras as well before they hit the market. And I shot with the Z7 II and Z6 II, predominantly the Z7 II. Mm-hmm. I feel like there was, you noticeably see a bump in image quality as well. You know, when you're looking at cameras online, everybody's looking at specs and they're looking on paper, it never defines image quality. I feel like there was a huge jump in image quality, as good as it was, to see more crispness and great detail. Like you said, better dynamic range. Did you feel the same thing?
Yeah, absolutely. And the first thing you notice is, I ingest the photos and we're looking at the JPEGs right out of the camera. We're looking at the RAWs. And the best part about it is, the colors are spot on. It's right where you want it. It's that beautiful Nikon color that I love. And, the beauty of the NEF file, it can take so much pushing and pulling. It's just a very robust RAW file. And the JPEGs were looking great right out of the camera. And just the functionality of everything. It's nice because, like with SnapBridge, I can just take it, camera straight out of the camera, right onto the phone. I can process everything however I want to there. I can send it out to you guys for review, or if I've got something that's really killer, I'm like, oh man, you've got to see this. You can send it out. So it's great to be able to do that for an editor. But, it's just nice that, everything that you've come to expect with the Z line, it's continued. But not only is it continued, you've taken another step, whether it's, battery performance, autofocus, and the quality of the file. It keeps getting better and better, which is no surprise, frankly.
Mm-hmm. All right, so let's move on to soccer. You really had to put AF to the test here, I'm sure. Even though these situations are staged, it's still real action. Talk a little bit about the assignment, what you got going here, which lens did you choose, the whole works.
Sure. So that first day, we shot everything kind of midday into the evening. Soccer, we started first thing the next morning. And when we were cleaning up everything from the day before and kind of storing our gear, we were just trying to anticipate what it would be like in the morning. I've got apps that's going to show me right where the sun's going to be, where we're going to be backlit. It's another backlit situation because when it comes to sports, I really am a big fan of that, and just kind of the highlights you get on hair and the body, and the nice lack of harsh shadows on the face. But I also love the way that water can light up whenever it's backlit. The situation we had here that morning was just perfect. It was pretty humid the night whenever we left, and so I was kind of holding out hopes, because when you've got something set up like this, you don't have control over Mother Nature, and you don't know what's going to happen. And so we've had times before on previous campaigns where I think it was Z7 and I was doing some track and field stuff, and we hadn't had any rain in North Texas in weeks, and the day we did that shoot, it just rained, and there's nothing you can do about it. And so that was a good test for the weatherproofing of that camera. And fortunately for this shoot, like, everything came together. And so, we had a lot of dew on the grass, and so that's nothing that's added in for that. And, to really get that to pop, I knew backlight's going to be the best situation. So we had our soccer players here just go and start about 40 yards from me and say, all right, guys, pick out who's going to be on offense, who's going to be defense, and I want you to battle and do it just like you would be in a game. And so this is 400-2.8, which is, like I said before, a bread and butter lens for me. And at that point, we had the camera dialed in. I kind of reviewed everything from the day before, saw what I liked, saw where I felt like it was going to help me perform better, and set everything accordingly. And at this point, we're just flying, making pictures. Just one after another. It really, really was a joy.
What lens were you using here?
400-2.8 with the FTZ adapter.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's really important too. In a short period of time, as we continue to roll on with the next generation of Z, so many Z Nikkor lenses have come out. And like you said, you work with the 7200. You've got the Trinity now, the 1424, 2470 as well. But the ability to adapt your 400, which is, I believe that's one of your favorite focal lengths, and certainly, one of the more powerful lenses in your arsenal. Talk about the ability to do that with some of the other Nikkor lenses you've got.
Yeah, absolutely. The 400 is something that's always in my bag for a sports assignment. I rarely go anywhere without it, unless I know that it's just going to be way overpowering for a situation. But I can throw my 200 f2 on there, which is a lens I use a lot as well, the 105-1.4, for doing my behind the scenes stuff. It's a lot of prime things. So as much as I love the 35-1.8 for the Z, I still like my 1.4, but I'll even get into some vintage glass. I've got an old 500 f5 mirror that I can throw on there for some different effects that I absolutely love, which could have been really interesting with some of those, donut highlights, especially if this is a game situation and you've got the crowd in the background and you have all these colored donuts in the background, which would have been just absolutely stunning. But, obviously couldn't bring in 4,000 people to put them in the background there. But
I love your approach. And I think this is a thing. if you guys tuning in, it's those little intricacies you talk about, the backlighting, the water, those things that you look for. And I think that's what separates an average sports photographer from a great sports photographer. And you are certainly that. We talked about this picture too. You talked about autofocus, and you were a bit surprised, you know, the camera lateral movement like this was actually able to keep up. Talk about this scenario.
Yeah, I mean, and this is a situation where we don't have any foam. So our keeper here, he's laying it out, and he's not diving with the ball. We've got our other guys that are actually firing and shots hard on this, and he's just saving them like a champ. And it was really impressive. And so this is a situation where instead of tracking something coming towards you or going to the side, this is a very abrupt lateral movement. And for it to be able just to grab it and hold it, that was super impressive. I mean, through the entire range of motion, from the time he's leaving his feet, catching the ball. And this is where, you know, having all those frames per second really can be clutch, because, you know, a frame beforehand, that arm is going to be blocking the face a little bit. And so you finally get it to where he's got that full extension back, face presents itself, and you've got just a really, really stunning frame. And so for me, like, you know, on this stuff, like, this is like I would have in a game. I'm off to the side in a similar situation I would be if I was covering a match, and these guys are firing shots and he's diving, and it grabbed everything. This was one of those situations where I was like, all right, we're really, really moving, and this is a big step in the right direction, and this is what I need to cover an event.
I want to bring this up again in a little compositional thing, so we do a little bit of educating here. You purposely stood there because you got a nice, clean background there. Talk about, to people that want to shoot more sports photography, how important is the background?
It's absolutely crucial. You can have the best frame in the world, but if you've got a striking background, or you're, you know, shooting at f8, and so you've really brought the background into the frame, you know, your action can't stand out. So there's another frame that I actually prefer a little better from a compositional standpoint, just because he's lower to the ground. It's not as great and as dramatic with the hands and the fingertips of the ball, but it's just a solid blue background whenever you crop to it on that one that I really like. But yeah, backgrounds are huge. I mean, whenever I get to a venue, that's something I'm walking around, I'm finding out what my backgrounds are going to be. I'm surveying where my light's going to come from. This is all things that we go into, like I talked about earlier, the fundamentals. You know, these are all things I'm looking for to get my mind where it needs to be to cover an assignment.
Mm-hmm. But brilliant photo, and thank you for explaining the autofocus techniques you used and how it worked. And as we roll into soccer here, continue on rather with soccer, just talk about this show. We got another dive. We got a mat here going on.
Yeah. Brought the phone back out for this one. I said, all right, guys, I want to see some diving headers, and then just kind of do, you know, some single point AF and say, all right, you know, find out, you know, tell your teammate where you want the ball. They're going to toss it for you. And I want you just coming forward and really giving me some good diving header and midair action. And, you know, it's one of those things where the guys just absolutely had a blast with it. I had a blast with it. Cameras just making frames left and right. This is where we just get to where we're just having fun. And it's silly just how many pictures we come away with and how much data we then have to go through whenever you're cranking through it, you know, 12, 14 frames a second, and just making shot after shot after shot. And you're like, all right, well, how much better can we make this? And all right, can you turn a little bit this way? Can you turn a little bit about that way? And, you know, we had shots from the start. And at that point, you're just like, all right, how much better can you make it? And then after a while, like, all right, we got to move on to something else. We're having too much fun doing this. We need a new challenge. And then it's on to the next one.
I know that feeling, because you think like you'll make a better picture, and then you see a brilliant picture in the take, you know, through the camera as you're playing back. And let me try it one more time, maybe good. And I love the fact that, again, now we do have the stadiums as a background, but you drop it out of focus so much, it doesn't become that distraction you were talking about before.
It's 7200 wide open at 2.8. So I'm sharp.
Beautiful.
Edge, so.
We talked about this picture too. How are you shooting this? This, again, every frame almost seems to be perfect, but again, I'm sure there's some on the cutting room floor that don't make this take.
Well, I mean, even still, like, you know, those that know me know I hate 99% of everything I shoot. You know, that's just how I'm wired. Like, I'm a perfectionist, and I'll just beat myself up over things, but it's also kind of what keeps me improving, and I'll learn from those mistakes and work my butt off to make sure I never make those things again. This is a situation where, you know, I would do if I was covering a game is I'd love having a remote camera behind the goal. That's been one of my specialties in sports photography for a long time, is the remote camera. Be able to put the viewer in a position where I can't physically be, but you can put a camera there and really give something a different offering both to editor and to the viewer. And so set the camera up behind the goal, had our forward out there, Mackenzie, lobbing some shots, and Michael was, tending net, and just had him jumping, diving, tipping the ball over the bar, and at this point just letting the camera do its thing. So
14-24, I assume.
14-24, yeah, absolutely. I figured out, whenever I knew the lenses that I wanted to emphasize, I said, all right, let's put these in positions that I would actually be using these things for in a game and see what it can do. And flawless.
And I love the fact that you do have the person kicking to the goal, that lower right corner. There's a nice progression, beautiful, just larger than life kind of explosion from the wide angle here. And of course, loving that the ball is there and the goalie's diving in a great position, technique. Really well done. How many times does he get to jump?
Oh, he did this a handful, in part because he loved it. So it was good practice for everybody. Everybody got to practice getting some shots on. He got to practice saving. I got to make a ton of pictures. I mean, I think it was a situation where certainly the whole team won. And on top of that, we had a blast getting to do it. For me, I got to kind of, relive some glory days, and I have appreciation for the talents of everybody there. When I started off, I was a keeper, and before I moved to the field. So for me, it was a lot of fun to kind of get to do this. The last, time I'd been in the Cotton Bowl, and the only times I was ever in the Cotton Bowl before this was World Cup back in '94. I was at a couple of games and an opening MLS game for the Dallas team whenever the league got started back in the '90s. So it was a lot of nostalgia for me in doing all this. So it was a lot of fun. And then whenever you get to put on something wide like the 14-24, I can envision what this would look like, with the stadium being full, with a full squad on the field and competing, and knowing that when it comes to game time, I could put this there and know it's going to do exactly what I need it to do.
Exactly, because this could be World Cup championship game. They're in a penalty kick situation, and this is the kind of shot you're going to make, and that's where the rubber meets the road. That's where you see that success. Now, I love this shot because we keep talking about this math that you picked up the foam, jumping a little bit behind the scenes, just so everybody gets a chance to see, like some of the other players outside that goalie that didn't go with the cushion, that this is the little trade secret to keep the athletes going so they don't get injured.
Absolutely. That's the name of the game. It's bad business if you end up having an athlete get injured on a shoot. It's just something you don't ever want to have happen. So it's something I'm very meticulous about. So whenever we tested out several things, we just didn't have the opportunity to get like a large crash pad trucked in, again, because we're working with a really truncated timeline, and trying to get things from a logistical standpoint shipped in on short notice, especially in a COVID world, all very challenging. So we're like, all right, how are we going to solve the problem? And so it ended up being, like I said, about $600-700 worth of high density couch foam, and kind of layer it in together. And then we kind of tested it out a little bit in the store, and then like, all right, we think this is going to work. It's got potential. Buy it all, load it up in the back of the car, and then bring it to my house, test it out. Like, yep, this is going to work. This will do. And then just get everything and haul it out to the stadium and get ready to make some pictures. So, but the name of the game is you don't want anybody to get hurt, but also the more you can protect them, the more they can keep doing this. But then on top of that, the great reward is you make a really, really baller frame, and then you show them. I mean, and there's just that much more adrenaline into their veins, and they just want to keep doing it and say, these guys are perfectionists too. They're like, all right, how can I do it better? And they're coachable. So you can show them, a series of frames, and they can see, all right, I can do this a little bit differently. I need the ball to come in here from a little bit differently. Like, there's, I'm a purist. Like, there's no Photoshop in this stuff. Like, I want to create the frame in camera, whether I'm doing an overlay or, anything with lighting. Like, I enjoy the magic of trying to make the full picture in the camera and not doing anything in post. And so I want my athletes to be able to do the same thing. And so it's fun whenever all that starts to come together. And yeah, certainly having foam helps out with that.
So, and I also want to mention too, folks tuning in, that these are seasoned athletes and they know how to move their bodies, that even though you have a foam pad, you still want to be safe with somebody. You just don't want them jumping and flipping into a pad because there's a way of landing. I think that's important too. But let's shift back over to the camera now. Have it for a very short period of time. It's just within a day or so. What's your confidence level like as we move on to this beautiful shot of the camera? Where certainly your confidence is up here to put it in the dirt. But how are you feeling about the camera after just a day or so of shooting?
I mean, complete confidence. I mean, I had no reservations about it at all. I full confidence in the camera, knowing it was going to respond to whatever situation that I was going to put it in.
Right.
This was a situation where, we're going to do some barrel horse racing, and I'm a big fan of equine sports. And the area where we were going to be shooting, they had about a foot of rain about 4 days before the shoot. And so it was tough because all of Texas had a lot of rain. And so we're trying to find a place where we were going to have an outdoor arena that was going to dry up in time. And so the owners of this facility, they were dragging it every single day to try to get it to air out. But that sand was still holding a lot of water, and a lot more than we were expecting. But whenever I saw it, normally in a situation like this, especially like with the development and engineering behind this new 14 to 24, because it'll take a filter, normally, especially moving forward, a situation like this, I'll have a filter on it. It'll have a trash bag wrapped around it with rubber bands. I mean, the camera is going to be protected, but we didn't have a lot of stuff with us, and I had to get the shot. So it dictated that I had to put the camera through a little bit of this abuse, but it handled it like a champ. It cleaned up perfectly. Nobody in New York was all the wiser, because you were the only one that saw this picture. And as soon as I got it home, it was cleaned meticulously, no sand, no dirt in any part of it, no moisture, and it got returned to New York in pristine condition. Because like you told me, I think there was only, what, 3 of those 14-24s in the country at the time?
In the country, yep, at that time. And again, yeah, okay, so we're giving up a bit of our secret. Every time you work on an assignment for us, you and I are talking on the side throughout the shoot. And I love when you pop me images, because that means I know you're loving what you're getting. And you sent me this image. What was the first thing I said?
You said, make sure nobody in New York sees that picture right now. I was like, don't worry, it's not going to leave my phone.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things, yeah, go ahead.
We just don't want to give anybody else undue anxiety. We're dealing with enough of it as it is trying to produce a shoot like this, and we don't want them to think, oh no, something's gone wrong. We just keep that as a little laughing point to ourselves, and know that we'll show everybody later on. But I knew that this camera was going to handle it. It's certainly not ideal, not something you want to make a habit of, because obviously you're going to, over time, your gear is going to take some wear and tear, but it handled it perfectly. It cleaned up great, and the camera did exactly what I needed to do, and we made the picture. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, you did mention other people about bagging the cameras, the way you've done that. I've seen you do that at the Kentucky Derby and a million horse races as well. But I also want to lay on the fact that you talk about that word confidence before. What people don't see on paper is the resiliency of the camera, the reliability of the camera, the durability of the camera. Precisely. What you're showing me here is you can challenge this camera to put it in a very extreme condition, work within in the rain, work within this sort of muddy situation, but have the confidence in the fact that it's going to work.
Absolutely. And perhaps that may, bring apart some anxiety for you guys in New York. But, whenever I have a situation like this, like I'm going to put the camera through its paces. I'm going to shoot it like I would normally shoot it. And I want to see, I'm going to put it through some pretty vanilla things early on and just kind of see, all right, how is it responding differently? But then I'm gradually going to step things up. And especially as my confidence with it increases, I'm going to push it harder and harder. The beauty of that is then it's challenging me, and it's allowing me to push my creativity to do something a little different, make a different picture. And for me, that's the part where it really, really gets fun, is trying to make a different picture, take some more risk, because, nothing risked, nothing gained. And at that point, that's where, it becomes less of kind of like an assignment, and the, weight starts to come off the shoulders a little bit. You've made some frames, and now things are trying to get really, really fun.
Mm-hmm. I want to mention too, you mentioned it before, and I don't want to skate past it, is the lens comes with 2 hoods, one that's a general hood and then another one that takes a filter. And how important is that to you as a shooter with a lens that's this wide?
That's huge, especially in a situation where, if you're going to be in some rain, you're going to be in the elements, you're going to be in a situation that's really dusty. Having that hood, I keep a hood on all my lenses. A filter on all my lenses. And so having that option for me is crucial, especially if I'm going to be doing a remote camera, something's going to be in the dirt. But I just keep, that's the photojournalist in me, is I don't put lens caps on things. I keep filters on things. And just because I want to be able to grab something out of my bag, put it on, and go make a picture, and not have to fumble with other things I'm trying to put in my pocket. I just want to grab and go, swap things out. That's just how I've worked. And so for me, having an option for a filter is huge.
I know you didn't have a lot of time to get something ready for this shoot, so next time will be the filter. I won't have such a heart attack when I see that picture, but when we saw it again, I think the first thing we both said was durability, man. This is what This is what really proves the durability. And this is a shot that came out of this. Talk about what you've done here, the athlete that you're dealing with, how she did this, how many times you did this, and how you direct somebody like this.
Yeah, with this, the direction is really easy. So this is Braille horse racing, which has been around for decades. And so its riders are going to run around 3 barrels in a clover leaf pattern for time. But this is a situation where we really get to showcase 2 athletes, you know, not only the rider, but also the horse itself, which is also an athlete. And for me, I like showing, you know, the power and the poise of both of them. And so you can't be standing 15, 20 feet from a barrel. I mean, that's just dangerous and not advisable, because it's not only safe for a photographer, it's not safe for the horse or the rider too. But you can put a camera there, and especially if you've, you know, worked this out in advance with the rider. There's several barrel horse racing events I've done before where I've done remote cameras in the dirt, and that's kind of where I had the idea for wanting to do this picture, which really lets us kind of show off the FPS power of the camera, because you can pick that perfect frame where the legs are right where you want it. The dirt's flying right where you need it. I mean, a couple frames after this, you see all the dirt fly toward the camera and stick all over the lens. And then of course has to get cleaned off after each shoot. But you know, these horses, we want to make sure that we treat them with respect and understanding that this is also hard on them. And so, you know, she brought 3 horses with her to the shoot, but I don't think we did any horse more than 5 trips. Like, that's it. I mean, it's like sprinting for them. So you can't just keep pushing them. We were not going to be in a situation, I would not let us be in a situation where there would be any injury to the horse, or it would just be pushing the horse too much, because then, you know, these horses compete, you know, then at that point, you know, this isn't fun for them either. And so you want to be mindful of that and honor that. And, you know, fortunately, you put the camera in the dirt and you know what it's going to do. You know, we could do it off 1, you know, we could do it off 2. The more runs we get, the better. We can change some things up, but you know, you plug it in. This is one of the first runs we had, and we got what we needed.
I love that you mentioned the safety of the athletes before. You don't want to be the photographer that gets an athlete hurt. Now you, of course, making it obvious. It's 2 athletes here. It's not just the rider, but the horse. And I love the fact that you dealt with all the safety factors too. That's so important. We had the last shoot we're going to talk about, or last part of your assignment that we're going to talk about. Something I love from you. You've done this for years. You and I worked actually at Purdue University. Remember that shoot?
Right,
and in Indiana, where we did a lot of sports photography for a little segment for PR way back when. I love your swimming work. We got a huge print on the wall outside of this room that I'm in right now of an overhead of a swimmer you've done. Talk about what you wanted to do here, how you did it, how you shot it, what lens and what focus modes. Again, give us the skinny on how you set things up.
Sure. At this point, this is the last shoot. And, you know, going into the assignment, I always want to try to have one thing that's going to be something that I haven't done before, or something that I haven't seen before, and, you know, a twist on something. And like, you know, I love being in the water and shooting underwater swimming. I think there's a power and a grace and a beauty to it. And anytime we've done it in the past, it's always been wide angle. You know, it's a 17-35, it's a 14-24 with a dome and something like that. And so I started looking through old swimming pictures of people that have done underwater stuff before, not looking to emulate something, but looking for something that I haven't seen. And so I had never seen telephoto underwater. And so knowing that I was going to have the 7200 with me on the shoot, I knew that this would be a big challenge for the camera, especially in low light autofocusing. But, you know, just to see how well it could track, how well it could hold, but also how well everything would compress with a telephoto underwater shot. And so I knew it was going to be a challenge. And so this was something that I had a lot of anxiety for, but you know, we'd had a good shoot. Everything had been coming together nicely. We had an amazing swimmer in Bethany Galat, who's competing over in Budapest right now, trying to get ready for Tokyo. And, you know, we had a great pool. We ended up having an indoor facility. I was really hoping for something outdoor so we'd have a lot more light, but we ended up being indoors. So I was like, all right, well, it's just another test for the camera and for the ISO capabilities, and let's see how it does. And this was the situation in probably the trickiest test for the camera where I was most impressed. This was one of the first shots we made. This is when she's doing her streamline underwater before she starts the breaststroke. She's easy 60 feet from me, and I'm at 200 millimeters, and it's just stunning, you know, wide open. So you get that little thin layer of bubbles. It's in focus, and everything in front of it and behind it's out of focus. This was a picture where I just pulled up and I was like, wow. Now the color version of this, because you're shooting through that much water and you're indoors, everything has, you know, heavy blue and cyan hues to it. But when I turn this thing black and white, and the reason why the background's black is we dropped a giant black background cloth to make that, you know, go dark. So we'd have a little bit of that contrast. We did the first couple shots without it, and I was like, guys, let's drop that down there, get everything set up just to really let her stand out from that background. And for me, this looks like, you know, a shark kind of coming through the water out of the darkness, just kind of flying right at you. And it just grabbed her, and it just tracked that focus. And then where I really kind of got blown away is everybody's like, oh, well, you've just got, you know, a subject coming straight towards you, you know, how, you know, that's not that hard of a thing to focus. I'm like, well, it is underwater, which adds a degree of difficulty, but then you forget this is a breaststroke. So she's underwater, above water, back and forth. And she's got arms in front, arms to the side, arms in front, arms to the side. And it was able to track that. And so whenever she'd be in a situation where her fingers would come in front of her, the focus would quickly grab those fingertips, and you'd see her fingernails in focus. And as soon as she opened up again, it was right back to her face. And this is all 14 frames per second that we were shooting underwater. And this was a blast. This is one of those things where, you know, we were just kind of laughing whenever we look at some of these pictures, like, oh my God, this is really fun. And then that's, you know, when, you know, you've got a great product is, you know, you're making the pictures that you wanted to make, but you're getting to have a blast doing it. We're having fun, the crew's having fun, the athletes loving the pictures. I mean, that's when everything really comes full circle.
It seems like the camera just naturally became a part of you, and you stopped worrying about the settings on the camera, except for the shot that you're going to make, and you just use that tool. It just becomes a part of Andrew Hancock at that point. But these are phenomenal. Again, I love your swimming work. I love the fact that you do get in the water. And at times I've seen you down there with your tank, so you scuba a bit. But just let's close out these pictures, talk about these and how you've done them. This is a little bit closer, right? Or is this still the 7200? Just a little bit closer.
Yeah, so this will be closer. This is probably about 70, 85 millimeters. So she's close to me in the stroke, which also has helped out the color immensely, and with how she's right up at the, you know, about to break the surface of the water. And so this is actually full frame. Like, you know, there's no crop to this. That's edge to the edge. And, you know, it's sharp. It's been tracking her through the whole thing. And this is kind of one of those situations where, yeah, you talk about the you know, having 14 frames a second to choose from, and you can get those arms spread out, you get the bubbles, you know, flying off of her under the water. And, you know, this is when everything just kind of comes together. And so, like you said, the camera is really an extension of me. I'm not having to think about the functions. Everything is set. Everything's working. I just get to focus on the composition, because, you know, being underwater and doing this and trying to be stable, and I'm really OCD on symmetry and trying to be right in the middle of the lane and not drift and stuff like that. There's a lot of things going on. And it's just nice just to be able to be focused on, you know, the composition, the viewfinder, and getting the picture right. And at that point, that's really a blessing whenever everything just becomes second nature and you just kind of get focused in on that. And, you know, that's when everything for me just feels really pure.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much. Let me stop the share, bring you back full screen. I feel like I can breathe all of a sudden, like I'm following you through this whole journey of when you use the camera, and it's quite exciting. And again, you know, we're no strangers. I've known you for quite a while now. When you were a young pup, as you've grown up into this phenomenal photographer, and we certainly love working with you. And I can't thank you enough for sharing the insights here. Again, it's one thing to see something on paper on a website and see the specs. It's another thing to actually talk to a professional like you who's used the product and gives us some great insight for what you've done. Not to mention share your tricks and tips to anybody out there that wants to do the same thing. So just, I guess, overall final impressions of the camera and the system?
Yeah, I mean, really, really impressed. I mean, it's a situation everybody asks me, well, are you going to be upgrading? Yes, I'm going to be upgrading all of my Z lenses, all my Z cameras. You know, I'll upgrade both my Z7s and both my Z6s. I'm fully invested in this line. I love what's coming down the pipeline with the new lenses. The lenses that are being put out are insane. I love them. And like I said, the 24 to 70S, I love more than my f-mount lens. It's just a personal feeling. Same thing with the 14 to 24, the way it's balanced, the 7200, the way I like to shoot. I mean, it's the perfect fit. And so I've been aligning, you know, all my purchases towards the Z system. I mean, and now it's doing what I needed to do and what I expected to do on the field. It's already proven itself to me what it can do behind the scenes and being quiet and allowing me to move seamlessly and have that EVF to where what you see is what you're going to get, and knowing everything's going to be just like I need it to be. And whenever I pull it up on the computer, it's exactly like it was when I saw it through the EVF, and that's huge. But for me, no, I'm blown away. I love the direction that everything's going. With a shoot like this, you know, like I said, I put it through the normal paces where I would expect it to perform well. And when it proved itself there, I'm like, all right, now it's time to step things up and let's put it through some challenging situations that's going to push me. And it passed all those with a flying color. So it really, really was a treat. And thank y'all for the opportunity to, you know, put this through its paces, to test it out, to test myself. I really enjoyed it and appreciate the opportunity.
Well, I know you and I spent several days on the phone back and forth as you were getting this together. And once you got rolling, to see those pictures come in on my phone, just off the back of the screen, was quite impressive. So again, thank you for all that. Those of you tuning in, we had a great segment here with Andrew Hancock. The next generation of Z moves on. We are talking to people who've actually used the cameras. So check us out on NikonUSA.com for the Creators Hour, and on assignment, and more interviews with photographers that have used the equipment, have some great insight to share with us. So I am Mike Corrado for Nikon. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we will see you soon.